sure to respond to you afterwards as well. So if we are all happy, let's get into it. So just background, so you know who's talking and why I'm even relevant to talk about this subject. I am a consultant. I run a consulting company called Agile Management Office. For background, the company's been around for 4 years, but I have been in the corporate space working in and around projects for about 16 years now. I've done so in 22 different companies, more now actually, across 16 countries and 15 different industries. What that means is I should be able to give you some insights to what's happening across different industries as we progress further in today's webinar. My specialty area is governance and change, so helping to identify changes that are required and then helping projects and their teams to deliver it. Doing so by enabling and making sure that we're also meeting governance requirements, whether they are corporate governance, whether they're governance regulatory requirements by a particular industry, etc. So that's sort of my key specialty. And in addition to that, I'm also a corporate advisor to university in Denmark, who we've done work with in the last few years, and provide them regular advice on what's going on in the corporate landscape in relation to projects and governance. So that's a little bit about me. Moving on. So keep yourself on mute if you want to ask questions in the chat box, and feel free to take as much notes as you want. As I said, I'd be more than happy to try to cover all your questions today. So I said this is for beginners, so fundamentals, just starting with the most basic definition of project management. It sounds like some of you may already know what project management is. For those that don't, when we think about project management, fundamentally, it's all about identifying something that needs to happen and then planning to then achieve that particular goal or objective. Whether you are running a project within a business, whether you're running a project for yourself, whether you're running a project for a, maybe whether you're planning a wedding, that could be a project, whether you are building a new building, like for example, constructing a house, that could be deemed a project, etc. Ultimately, it's around a specific action that you have got predetermined result that you're trying to achieve. And we'll go into a bit more detail about it in a moment. But fundamentally, the most unique part of projects is that they have a predetermined end, unlike operational work. For example, paying bills, running the payroll within a company, they are all operational type work. Projects means you have an objective you want to achieve, you plan towards that carefully, and then you deliver. It's a single time action that produces the results that you desire. So I've just sort of elaborated on that, but it's a basic definition of project management. Now, one of the things I think is really helpful for people to understand when it comes to project management, and this is something that I, in my career, early in my career 16 years ago, was something that wasn't clear to me. And that is, when we talk about any business in the world will operate operations, where that is often referred to as running the business. And then they also deliver lots and lots of projects, which is referred to as changing the business. So on the left side, we're changing, and on the right side, we're running. Now, both are equally as important to any business's long-term success, their growth, and them being able to work within any landscape to support their competitive nature and what they're trying to achieve. Whether you are a 10-person business, such as my organization, or whether you are a 100,000 person business, we'll be doing both projects and operations. So let's go and take a look at what are the key differences when we think about projects versus operations. And I think with projects, I mentioned, it is a temporary endeavor, meaning it has a defined end. That means you know that your project that you're working on will finish at a point in time, whether it's in 3 months or 3 years, that part of it is irrelevant. So project management also delivers a unique output. What that means is when you're delivering a project and you are trying to meet the project's objectives, you're expecting that at the end of a project, you're going to be delivering something that is unique that was not there before. For example, if I was implementing a new software into my organization that I wanted all of my salespeople to use, that didn't exist before, that would be considered a unique output. And then additionally to that, once you achieve the objectives of your project, meaning you've met the requirements that have been portrayed to you, whether you've come up with some requirements to build a house and then the house is built, whether you are installing a new system for your salespeople to use, or whether you're setting up and managing a wedding, which I did using project management, and that comes to a defined end. Ultimately, all of those things relate to the temporary and unique nature that is project management. So when you think project management, think temporary and think unique. On the other hand, when we think about operations management, here we're thinking about repetitive tasks that are needed to run your business, your home, your team, day-to-day activities that are being done to help keep a business going are what constitutes operations management. Some examples of that are running payroll. Now, running payroll is not temporary, it's not unique, and it's not stopped after you complete the next payroll. Otherwise, we'd all be unhappy if we weren't getting paid. So that's not projects, that's operations. For example, you might use project management to build a warehouse, and you would need to have pre-defined project plans and stakeholders on board, and you may need to bring in lots of different resources, and you'll have a set defined budget to do that. But when the warehouse has been built and you go into someone managing the warehouse, that then becomes operations. So when you think about projects, think about changing your business or changing the way you work. Where you think about operations, think about keeping the lights on and running your organization. And that is fundamentally the main differentiators between project management and operations. This one may be something many of you are familiar with, and if you're not, it has many different names. Project management triangle is one of them. The triple constraint is another. You might hear the term iron triangle. If you are aware of what project management is, at the very fundamentals, this is something you would know about, particularly when it comes to the waterfall type of methodologies. And I'm going to talk to you about methodologies in a moment. But if you hear project management triangle or project management in general, this is what you should be thinking about. Every project will come in different shapes and sizes. Some organizations might run similar projects that are similar size, similar budget, similar scope, etc. But typically, you won't find many projects that are so aligned to one another. And the reason for that is there are so many nuances and variances for projects, depending on the country, the company, and the industry. And so no two projects are alike typically. They may have similarities, but even when you associate different project managers with them, you tend to get different ways of running the project and different outcomes and different results. So one of the things that makes project management such an exciting career or such an exciting profession to be part of is that you get to work on so many different things that you know at a point in time when that project ceases, you've delivered something. If you're in construction, you get to see the something. If you're in IT, you may not get to physically see it, depending on what it is that you're working on. But it makes it a really exciting industry because it enables us to bring together unique ideas and actually deliver them to see the outcome in line with what we plan to achieve. The project management triangle always has the scope, the cost, and the time. Quality sort of sits in the middle because that's the center and the heart of what we do in project management. But if you were to change any of the scope, know that your time or your cost will change. If you change the cost of a project, for example, as a manager, you may reduce the budget that you give your team to deliver a particular project, or know that your scope needs to reduce accordingly, and the time frame that you have may also need to reduce. So the fundamental of the reason why it's a triangle is because you need it to be equal sides in order for it to work. Whenever you stretch out one way or the other, it therefore loses its shape as a triangle and becomes a lot more open to problems. So you need to balance the scope, which is what you want to achieve, what you want to deliver, with the time that you have available or the time you make available with the costs associated. For example, if I go back to planning a wedding using project management, I had a predetermined cost, so a predetermined budget. And in terms of what I wanted to achieve as a result of the wedding and the things I wanted to have during that, well, that was determined as well, probably from when I was a little child. So scope and costs were fixed. I can't change those. I don't want to change those, and they were locked. What does that mean? Well, that means that I can modify the time that I have so that I can deliver to the scope and to the costs, meaning I would make the time frame for my wedding probably further out to give me more time to either save up or to get a Sunday instead of a Saturday, which is usually cheaper. So you need to watch out and make sure that none of these variables are modified without looking at how it affects the others. And that's really important in project management fundamentals. Now, methodologies. I wanted to be careful not to put too many methodologies. I'm not sure how much of a background the others that have joined the call recently have. So I want to just be really high level with this, but I'm happy to answer any specific questions. Just starting with the fundamentals with methodologies. When projects are being run, typically you follow some form of methodology. Now, the methodology you choose to follow can be something that is in existence globally, and you can get certifications and training and all that sort of stuff. But fundamentally, without all of that, you follow a certain number of steps. The ones I've listed at the bottom here, initiate, plan, execute, control, and closure, are some of the fundamentals of, one of the most well-known methodologies known as PMBOK, Project Management Body of Knowledge. There is a lot of people trained in that, and that is one of the most common methodologies used when we think about waterfall projects. And I'll explain that. Most projects up until more recent years, and I'm talking about probably the last 20 years, but even more so in the last 5 to 7 years, really followed waterfall methodologies, such as PMBOK. Waterfall basically refers to the sequencing of events. So initiation, planning, execution, for example, will all follow each other sequentially. So you can see in the image on the screen, I've drawn a picture of steps. Well, a waterfall typically flows downward from the top of the mountain, etc. And so that is how typical traditional projects are run, with the phases following each other sequentially. You don't start the next phase until the prior phase is completed. The reason why people would use a waterfall type of methodology, other than the fact that it's been around a very long time and really came out as one of the earliest methodologies, not specifically PMBOK, but just in general in terms of waterfall of an approach, it was something that was used by a lot of organizations because it gives them the opportunity to maintain that control. And it really helps them to make sure that they close out all of the necessary activities, tasks, outputs, deliverables, etc. in each phase, making sure they've ticked all the boxes they need to tick, make sure they've got a clear view on what the budgets are for the remaining phases before they give the green light to progress to the next stage. So when you think about project management, majority of project management starts off, and particularly for large programs, very large scale pieces of work typically follow a waterfall methodology. When we look at Agile, now Agile is not a methodology, but Agile is sometimes referred to because within the Agile world, there are a number of different methodologies that exist. There is a number of different companies that have brought out their own. For example, there is one called Scaled Agile for Enterprise, also known as SAFE. There is methodologies such as the one that is referred to as XP, Extreme Programming. There is methodologies such as Scrum. Now, for some of you, they might be terms you've never heard, and that's okay. But the reason I mention them is because if you hear the word Agile now, which is absolutely skyrocketing in popularity in organizations and companies that you probably have heard of or worked with or work for, it's becoming more and more common to use a more agile approach to project management. And the reason for that is because it enables organizations, as you can see from the image on screen, to actually take the customer, or whoever the customer is, whether it's the staff member or a physical customer, such as in a bank, their end users are the customers who are, buying groceries and using their credit cards. It enables you to work iteratively with your customer and with other stakeholders in an organization and slowly deliver or release pieces of change and get feedback and then make further changes going forward. For example, typically within Agile will typically run what they call sprints. Exactly what you imagine when you think about sprints, such as going for a run. They use that term to describe the speed at which we make change. And that speed typically from an Agile perspective is usually within a 2-week period. So for example, in Waterfall, we might take, let's say, a month or 2 months to do initiation or planning. In an Agile world, you might actually plan within 2 weeks what you're going to deliver and just do a little piece of that change up front and then come back, get feedback, and then go back and replan the next stage. So you don't need to plan the whole project up front. You can actually incrementally and iteratively deliver change with live feedback from your customers. And so there's a very different approach to Agile versus Waterfall, and there's many, many methodologies that exist today that work for both of those. And I will talk to you a little bit more about methodologies in a moment, but I just wanted to give you an overview of delivery styles, and the styles are underpinned by a particular method that you choose to use. So we think about fundamentals. Project management, I'd like to describe it as a team sport. Everybody in the project, whether you're a 2-person or you're a 10-person or you're a 100-person project management team, a project team, typically is assigned a project manager or a project lead. And depending on the size of the project, you might have multiple project managers reporting to a program manager or a portfolio manager. And that is how they manage larger scale change, because you can't have one project manager across every single project or across really large pieces of work that might have different elements across that particular project. And so sometimes you might need to bring on multiple project managers and they might manage multiple streams. If you've not done project management before, typically you might be assigned a junior project management role to begin with, or you might be a project analyst or a project coordinator, someone that sort of works with a project manager and shadows them to really learn. And that's a really one of the fundamental ways of learning and getting practical hands-on experience, is actually going through that approach and actually shadowing a project manager as an example. So project management itself is all about team sports, and it's really important about making sure that everybody is contributing their part to ultimately achieve the objectives that you're trying to do so. And the way you do that is by managing closely and carefully the resources, the budget, and the time associated with your project. So as I mentioned before with the project management triangle, you've got those 3 things that you need to worry about: scope, time, and cost. While within that cost, there would be resources that you would need to make your project successful. And resources can be people, it could be software, it could be hardware, it could be a lot of different things. In addition to making sure that you plan your project well, you also need to manage it through to completion. And whilst you're doing that, always checking back and referencing the original scope that you agreed to deliver. Where there is requests for changes to that, you need to make sure that you are raising changes with the person paying for the project so that you're not caught out. And it happens a lot. You get given a scope, you get given a budget, and you get given a time frame. And then as you progress your project and you've done all your planning, you're then told that you actually need to deliver, another 30 or 40% of different things. Now, if you're not careful to request more time and more budget for that, you may find that your triangle is no longer a triangle, and that's when you'll have problems. So just circling back on methods, something you might hear referenced a lot is the word or the term hybrid approach. Now, hybrid approach is best principles fundamentally and elements identified from both an agile and a waterfall delivery style. It's not a specific part of those, but fundamentally, particularly for the larger organizations, and I've never seen this any different in my career, they would typically take the elements of PMBOK, which you can see on the screen, PRINCE2, which is another one. This one was very heavily used in government, and it stands for Projects in Controlled Environments, and it was something that I've seen used quite a lot in government here as well as from the UK. Then you've got agile methods, methodologies such as Scrum, SAFe, XP, DSDM, etc. And then there's others. There are others that exist that may be not as well known. They are all methodologies. And when you come to a hybrid, which is what most organizations will do, that just means they pick the best of all of those, or some of those, or maybe the first two, or whatever it is, to make it work for their organization. And they basically break it down into manageable components across the different disciplines of project management, so that they can deliver a project using an approach that they've determined suits their organization best. And that might apply some agile and some traditional waterfall principles and methods. The reason companies do that is because they often find that any methodology that exists in the market has never been a one-size-fits-all. I don't think any of them are or ever will be. And so they need to modify it to suit the way that they do their funding, the way that they do their resource management, the way that they do their scheduling, or the way that they do their managing. So you need to take what works for you. And if you're starting out in project management, you don't want to get bogged down in thinking that you need to know all these methodologies and all the others that exist in the market. But a good start would be just to know the fundamentals of project management, and then deciding what method do you think is going to help you in your industry the most in order to select the right one. For me, I started in project management 16 years ago, and I have been fortunate to certify and actually work within all of these methodologies, except for XP at the moment. So I actually chose to do that to give me an opportunity and an appreciation for all the different methods, but I did that over a period of time. So that's just an overview of project management methods. Now, another one. Now, this one is really important to know because it's the basis of any project. It's referred to as WBS, or work breakdown structure. The reason why I mention this is because without fail, I've at least been interviewed easily over 100 times for jobs in my 16 years as a contractor. And this question of what does WBS stand for has come up at least half a dozen times. So if you're a beginner in project management, and even if you're someone who's been in project management for longer than being a beginner, you probably heard this term and you probably have used this. And if you haven't, you can kind of see fundamentally what it's trying to do is take a really big task, a really big aim, a big objective, which in this example is building a house, which has probably hundreds of steps underneath it. So in order to build a house, you break that up into the next stage, and you start off with the first task being effectively, your base we'll call it number 1. And then you start to break down the tasks, and you can see that that's done using numbers sequentially. Everything under planning becomes 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, and everything under build, and you might even have another section as well that might be architecture, or might be whatever it is that you want to put in your WBS. But the purpose of it is that you try to take the goal or the objective of building a house in this example, or running a wedding, or introducing a new software program for a company, or building an office, whatever it might be, and you try to break it down into manageable chunks, because the smaller the chunk, the easier it is to manage. My rule of thumb is you shouldn't have, especially in a large project or a large program, I'm talking something that's over $1 million, let's say, something that goes for a greater length of time than maybe 2 weeks. 2 weeks is a really good chunk, even 5 days, so 5 to 10 days. Once it goes over 10 days, then I think you can break it down further. Now, in some organizations, and particularly in government, Department of Defense or Department of Health and Human Services, or other major departments, they might not be able to break it down to that level. So what they would do is allocate multiple project managers who then will take that information and make their own WBS. But ultimately, the work breakdown structure rolls up information for you across the board of your project. So if you were going to start a project tomorrow, setting up a business, planning a wedding, planning a dinner party, you could follow a work breakdown structure to break down into manageable bite-sized chunks. In case you're not aware, there are many, many benefits of project management. I fell into project management when I was 17 years old, and it was the best thing that happened, because it's given me an abundance of experiences and opportunities to work with amazing people and in great projects. And if you're not already aware, and you maybe run a business, know someone who does, or maybe you're looking at doing a business, there's a lot of benefits for you in your life in general, but also in your business or in your place of work. And that the benefits that come from project management speaks volumes for itself. One of the things I mentioned to you at the beginning is project management is fundamentally half, if not more than half, of most organizations. The amount of money spent on projects annually, and I don't know the number, but I know it's in the billions of dollars. The amount of money spent by organizations on project management, one organization, a Big Four bank, for example, annually, they spend $1 billion, they were spending, when I recall being there, $1 billion per annum on project management. So imagine the opportunities that exist for you if you are or working within or around projects. The other thing that project management does is it gives you those, like that waterfall, the incremental steps that you need to help you on your journey to plan out to get towards the objective that you're trying to achieve. It also helps you when working with other people to collaborate and bring in expertise on things that maybe are not your specialty. I often engage people that are, from a HR background, or maybe someone who's an IT guru, because that's not my specialty. And project management helps you to bring experts together, even if you don't know the technical information. Sometimes it's possible, if you're a really good project manager, to bring those people together to deliver the same end result. Now, one of my biggest fears as a project professional early on in my career was being afraid to be a project manager, not knowing the subject matter expertise of whatever it is that we were rolling out. How could I be a project manager on a payroll software, or how can I be a project manager on whatever it was? Now, sometimes you do need subject matter expertise, and it absolutely adds value. But if you don't, and you're really good at project management, you would know how to extract that information and bring the right people into your team to help you along that journey. Project management, keyword is management. It's about managing, organizing, controlling, collaborating, supporting, and helping people to feel connected so that they can deliver projects that are going to help expand the opportunities for your business and for your team, but also helps you to manage potentially a lot of risk that comes from having a business. or working in a business. So a lot of project management at the moment in Australia anyway is around regulatory compliance projects. You might have heard that. You might see lots and lots of jobs on Seek or on LinkedIn for that. And the reason for that is there is a defined need to address a number of inherent risks that came out of the Banking and Finance Royal Commission. And so they're using projects because it is about changing the business, if you remember what I mentioned at the beginning, as opposed to just running the business. And they're using that to help them improve and minimize the chances of having problematic risks. Specifically to small business, and I know there's been people in this meetup group that are, from someone who has worked in a small business or interested in doing one, I don't need to explain these, but ultimately using project management in your business will help you become more efficient because it will help you think about how are you using your resources. You only have so much time and so much budget, and it would really, really help you to make sure that you're using and maximizing the efficiency of that. And doing so, I think you'll find that you will be able to create a repetitive framework to run projects and then use that ongoing. And we've done that in our business as well. And I think it makes a huge difference for you. As you grow and you bring other people on board, it will help you to make sure that other people in your business are knowing and understanding how you like to have projects run. Remember, you don't have to know or follow a specific methodology. You just have to decide if you want to use Agile or a delivery style. Now, turning an idea into reality. What are some suggested steps that I would recommend for you moving forward? Now, it doesn't matter if you are an entrepreneur or a wantrepreneur, someone who wants to be an entrepreneur, or a business owner, or someone that runs a business, your partner, your friends, etc. The first and foremost, most important step is to identify what the need is. What is it that you are trying to achieve? What is it that you want to do with your business or with your idea? If you have come across something that is, really frustrating, and you think, we should do something here to make that problem go away. Typically, a lot of ideas in entrepreneurship ideas come from someone finding a problem that frustrates them and coming up with an idea to address it. And so in order for you to know how to take that idea forward, you first need to know what it is that you think you want to do. And so I usually recommend that you either focus on a business need in your business, if you've got a business, or if you don't have a business and you're interested in looking at starting one day, then think about what it is that's the customer's need. What's something that a customer would be benefited by you solving, for example. Then you need to think about who are the people that you need to do market research with. Market research is something that I didn't do in my first business 7 years ago, and I don't have that business going now because I didn't do the relevant questions and research to actually understand whether the idea even had legs or something that would even be accepted as relevant or useful to them. Or would they pay for it? Is it beneficial? Does something like this exist already? These are the types of questions you should be asking your stakeholders or potential stakeholders. Don't be afraid to pick up the phone and ask, call if you're trying to, introduce an idea that relates to education. Call someone in the education space, or even try some of the government departments. They often have numbers for people that you can actually reach out to and ask them. Maybe you need to ask your local councillor, for your local council, for example, or your deputy mayor, or whatever it might be. Don't be afraid to do that. Then you need to think about what team members you need to help you. Now, often if you're starting out or you've got a new idea, you might either have to beg that people help you. You might have to borrow some expertise. So if you've got a partner or a friend or someone that's got marketing or sales expertise, you might have to, buy them lunch or dinner and convince them to help you out. Or you might be able to get volunteers because they believe that your idea is so good that they volunteer their time for free at the beginning to then see it become a reality. And that's fundamentally how a lot of organizations such as Facebook started off. They weren't getting paid to do what they were doing initially, and they brought some people together and actually made something become something big. Number 4, around incremental change. This is where if you decide to go down an agile path, and I recommend it as a small business or a new entrepreneur, I recommend that don't go and spend 3, 6, 9, 12 months planning something unless you're doing something crazy, dangerous. But don't spend that much time planning something that you haven't even tested with your potential customers. Rather, look at what is the one part that would make the biggest impact or the biggest difference for the life of your customer, whoever your customer may be, whether it's a school teacher, a child, or whatever it is, and see if you can just test a little bit of your idea. It might be a checklist that you start with. It might be I'm doing this webinar today to see whether project management for beginners is of relevance to anyone and does people want to know about it, and so forth. So you do that, and whilst you're doing that, think about how you can measure what you are trying to test. We once were going to set up a flavored popcorn business, working with a product that came from the US. We bought a box of 100, and we basically brought our friends over and asked them to taste test them and give us feedback. And that was enough for us to rank the flavors in order from 1 to 10. And then we decided which ones we felt were the most relevant. Communicate is a given. You need to make sure, from a project management perspective, I would argue that I would say 70+% is communication. If you're a good communicator, you have different communication styles for the relevant audience, you will be more likely to have greater success, because as I mentioned, project management is about bringing people together and helping them to work towards the same objective. Time box the work, what that refers to, it's just an agile term. And the agile term there is around breaking out the work that you want to do in smaller bite-sized chunks. When you've got your work breakdown structure, you can then pick what you're going to focus on and try to do that within the 2 to 4 week period. That helps you to then test the ideas and actually get feedback from your customers as you go. Delivering on time, so don't go out to market promising that you're going to have a book, out next month. If you're not, that ruins your credibility. Don't promise something you can't achieve. Under promise and over deliver. And then finally, if you've got people working with you, make sure that you've got a way to see and track progress, and don't, as a starting point with your idea, don't overburden yourself with too much documentation. Because if you're anything like some larger businesses, they are overburdened with so much documentation that they are just literally recreating week on week, month on month, because they don't have a consistent path to how they manage that documentation in some of their project teams. Some are getting better though. And just to round out taking your idea, if you are looking at, the business path, then I did say that I would share a bit more about getting organized. Now, this one is a natural progression from the slide previously, because the business need fundamentally makes up your vision and your mission. So if you've got an idea for a business, this one's specifically for those looking at having a business, setting up a business, or maybe you have one, or maybe you're starting out, you need to have your predetermined vision of what you want it to be, when all's said and done. And then your mission is how you're going to work to make that happen. You need to be able to convince the banks or anyone you're borrowing money from, or any staff you want to bring on board. If you don't have a clearly defined vision and mission that people can follow, then you're going to go around in circles. And I can tell you that because I've done that before. I didn't have a vision or mission for my first business, and my team and I, although they were very supportive, we went around in circles, and it wasn't helpful for anyone. When you know what your vision and mission are, and the reason why you're doing what you're doing, you then define the roadmap. So the roadmap, you can link this back to project management and create a work breakdown structure of the things that you want to achieve. You can start off very high level and then break it down into further detail as you move forward. Once you've defined your high level work breakdown structure, you can also look at what is the goal you're trying to achieve. Many of you may have heard of SMART goals, so specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-based. Well, having those defined for your goals that tie back to your roadmap will help you to take your idea from just an idea into something that possibly can become a reality. Once you've got those in place, you will find that you will no doubt in your own time create your own framework. Framework simply being, how are you going to take future ideas into reality? And just as you go, slightly writing down what it is that is the approach that you are using, because you'll find in due course that that probably becomes your hybrid project management approach. You know, what are the specific steps that you want to achieve? And always make sure that whatever you deliver meets your customers' requirements. And they are fundamentally going to help you to get organized and take your idea from an idea into something that's more relevant and more realistic. So just rounding out some key principles on project management. I'm not going to go through these, but when you are running projects, have these top of mind. They are really important to help you make sure that you are being efficient and effective and staying true to what project management is about, without forcing you into a square hole and forcing you to use a specific methodology or forcing you to understand that specific theory behind it. You just need to know some of these fundamental basics around key principles in order for you to be able to move forward. And I like to reference these as sort of a guiding light for project management basics. There's so much more I could add on here, but I just thought I would start with these 9 as an initial starting point. So that's pretty much the overview of project management for beginners.